Welcome, my irradiated friends, to the fourth installment of the Fallout Bible, in my series that goes over the Bible in excruciating detail. The first three Bible installments that I covered in the previous videos are often referred to collectively as Bible Zero, as they were combined into one mega entry with revised information. This fourth entry is not as long as some others, largely due to the fact that it does not have a timeline at the end. It does, however, contain more fan questions that Chris answers, which are always pretty interesting. The fourth installment was released on February 25th, 2002. In the intro, he gives a brief description of what these Fallout Bible entries are, but this is the first to be posted on the Black Isle Studios site. Previous installments had been initially posted on different Fallout-related sites. Chris then provides some updates on questions and requests from the third update, including why people liked pen and paper role-playing games, 50s era or 50s inspired music, and that no one could tell him where the Brotherhood of Steel holodisc he presented in the third installment could be found in the game. It is his supposition that since no one could find it, or was aware of it, that it is something that just didn't make it into the game. He then lists a number of Fallout-related websites that people can visit to get more Fallout-related community engagement. He lists No Mutants Allowed, Vault13.net, Duck and Cover, Vault of the Future, and FrenchVault.Vault13.net. Of all these sites, only No Mutants Allowed is still accessible, and Chris flat out states that No Mutants Allowed is his favorite of all the mentioned sites. So maybe Chris's undying love for the site is the reason it could persevere. Chris moves on to the questions section, where he states that he won't try and answer questions related to how fusion works in the Fallout series, because that is something he knows less than nothing about. I think it would be fair to say that no one knows how Fallout Fusion works. So, the first of the fan questions is as follows. On a more Fallout-y note, could you maybe explain the special encounter in Fallout 2 that everyone has to go through where Frank is seen shooting some farmer who refuses to give up some information? Why would Frank go out of his way to mow down a couple of farmers? What was so important? Think you could include this in the Bible too? I'm pretty sure lots of folks are curious. For reference, this is a scripted event in Fallout 2 where the player sees a man and his family refuse to cooperate with Frank Horrigan and some other Enclave soldiers and is promptly shot to bits. Chris then responds, "I'm sorry, Killian, but the answer is no. If anyone else had asked, I would have provided them with the documentation along with an audio tape of the designers describing the behind-the-scenes layout of the Frank Horrigan foreshadowing events." Crowd boos. Damn you all. Alright, I will violate my vow of I'm not going to talk about that FEV pustule argument-provoking Horrigan this week with the following documentation. Here's the deal on the player's first encounter with Horrigan. Note that this documentation is old, so it's got some problems. The documentation is as follows. Where? On the world map as a random encounter. When? 5th week of gameplay. The player stumbles upon Horrigan and a number of Enclave guards interrogating an old man and his family. Horrigan says that if the old man does not come with them quietly, then things will get very ugly. The old man refuses and says that he will not use his knowledge for him or his bosses. Horrigan retorts that if he does not change his mind, then he and his family will not see another sunrise. The old man refuses again. Horrigan: "Old man, you will come with us." Old man: "Leave us alone. I will never support the cause of your superiors." Horrigan: "I will not ask again. Come now, or you will be made an example of." Old man: "I would rather that the knowledge I have disappear with me into the grave." Horrigan: "So be it. Kill them all." Have him turn to face the right and left. Old man: "No!" All of the Enclave guards then open up on members of the family and Horrigan fries the old man with his special punch or shot. When they are dead, the player is given control back. Horrigan then says to the player that he would be wise to turn around and walk the way he came. Horrigan and his group then turn away from the player and walk towards the side of the map. Horrigan: "This is none of your affair. Turn around and walk away." If the player attacks, if possible, Horrigan will give the player one warning and say that doing such a thing again would be inadvisable. Horrigan: "That was ill-advised, but I will overlook it due to your obvious ineptitude. I will not do so again." So the answer is that there is no answer. The farmer was included as a foreshadowing device and allowed the player to see Horrigan's cruelty firsthand early on in the game. The reason for the farmer's death is a mystery. If I were to guess, I would say that the old man held key information on the possible location of a Brotherhood of Steel outpost/bunker. some key genetic research that would enable the researchers to finally decode the FEV and/or figure out how to release it. Perhaps the farmer was an escaped Enclave scientist, perhaps the man knew the location of Vault 13, unlikely, or perhaps he was an unwitting dupe in the enslavement of several Redding miners many years ago and was being brought in for questioning on the effects of the FEV on the miners. I'm still following up with questions for the designers, so more information may become available later. Unfortunately, we never get clarification on who the farmer is and what information he had that the Enclave wanted. Chris's guesses are as good as any out there. It is interesting this early document gives the option of the Chosen One engaging Frank Horrigan and the Enclave soldiers, as this is not an option in the game, where the player is forced to wait until Horrigan and his groupies leave the area before being able to do anything. The next question is, I heard there was going to be a monastery area in Fallout 2, but it was not implemented in the game. It supposedly would give the player more background information on the world of Fallout. My question, thinking about how the followers of the apocalypse kind of worshipped knowledge and learning a lesson out of the apocalypse, was this monastery to be the new base of the followers of the apocalypse? Chris responded with, I don't know, I haven't been able to find any documentation on it, but I don't think so. From what I heard secondhand about the story and the original locations in Fallout 2, the monks at the Abbey were interested in preserving knowledge, but they were not part of the followers of the apocalypse, though their ideals may have been quite similar. I sent off an email to Tim Kaine, and he might know, so stay tuned. And here's me a short while later with an answer from Tim Kaine. The Abbey, did not have the followers there. It was supposed to be an independent organization, probably of Jesuits or something like them. I'd probably go with the latter to avoid right-wing complaints. The monks preserved knowledge in the form of books, blueprints, and items, and they tried to preserve technical knowledge mainly. Unlike the Brotherhood of Steel, who hoarded their technology and used it to stay superior, the Abbey was open to anyone as long as they did not damage anything. All they had to offer was knowledge, because not a single preserved item functioned. One more thing. The monks did not understand the knowledge in the books they preserved. They treated them like holy materials to be read and copied and cared for, but not acted upon. Think of the book A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter M. Miller, which was the inspiration for the Abbey. So there you have it, coolness. So for those unfamiliar with A Canticle for Leibowitz, as I was, the plot has to do with a religious order that preserves knowledge of the world after it was annihilated in a nuclear war. In response, most people completely rejected knowledge. Most people were illiterate, and they violently persecuted those that tried to learn or harbor knowledge. I think it is cool that they were wanting to implement portions of a sci-fi post-apocalyptic story written in the 1950s in a sci-fi post-apocalyptic game with a 50s aesthetic. I also like the idea of a group of people trying to preserve knowledge while not really understanding it, as it would differentiate them from other factions that seek knowledge and technology. Brotherhood of Steel. The third question is, I keep wondering, what are those straps under the super mutant's upper lips good for? You see, when you look at Harry and the lieutenant, they seem to have straps of some sort that appear to be holding their upper lips up and baring their teeth. Moreover, Marcus in Fallout 2 doesn't have that. Can you dig up any documentation regarding these, or can you at least make up an answer? Smiley face. Chris's answer is as follows. Can't find a record for this. As far as I can tell, it's just decoration, or it was an aesthetic decision to make them look stupider, not stupid looking, just dumb looking. You know what I mean. Or, my best guess is that it was to enable them to talk coherently without their huge lips getting in the way. I mean, look at the upper lips those guys have. They're like tents to go over their jaws. Blah. I think Scott Rodenheiser, our sculptor modeler, was having fun with these models. Kind of like he did by punching bolts through Set, putting vices on Marcus's shoulder, and having a tree growing out of Harold's head. By the time he made Marcus, he may not have been in that frame of mind anymore, and Marcus is a pretty old mutant. So it's possible his skin was shrinking back and forming pustules and boils. Also, despite the general physical characteristics of a super mutant, variation does occur after dipping or FEV exposure. So it's quite possible that Marcus mutated differently than the other super mutants. He certainly was a great deal smarter and more level-headed than the others of his kind. By the way, in case you weren't aware of this, Scott Rodenheiser did a number of the talking heads for Fallout 1 and 2, and he eventually left for San Francisco to work at some other computer game company whose name eludes me at the moment. I think Leonard Boyarsky or Jason Anderson did the master though. So in case you've been wondering about this yourself, it is good to know that there doesn't seem to have been any purpose at all. It is hard to think of a great reason for it other than holding their lips up in a way that would help them speak, breathe, or eat better. The fourth question is, in the original Fallout 1, I never installed the patch. I was able to exhibit FEV virus exposure symptom in the glow after accumulating a certain amount of radiation, about 800 rads. Later, someone told me that this was a bug and is fixed by a patch, which I never downloaded. Is this true, or was this intended at first but later removed? Chris's answer is short. It was a bug. For some reason, you were gaining stat points when you were supposed to be losing them. You could attribute it to FEV if you want. I was confused by this question, as this was not anything I had ever heard about. Apparently a bug that increased stat points in the glow was attributed by people to be an effect of FEV, since the glow was the West Tech facility that was blown apart by nuclear warheads. And it was this facility referred to in lore that released FEV into the atmosphere, affecting organisms across the wasteland. This seems to be one of those things that people assume because it makes sense, and then it starts to take on a life of its own. It reminds me a bit of the fan theory that transistors were not invented in the Fallout timeline. The fifth question is, when you talk to the Master in Fallout 1, he has several voices or minds or whatever. Are these the people he consumed, or a split personality due to the FEV virus? Chris's answer is, these were people he consumed according to Fallout 1 designer Chris Taylor. Richard Gray was an explorer who found the vats. He is the primary master. The other people were added to him over the years. They are nameless. The master was an extremely powerful telepath, perhaps the first ever to exist, and definitely the last. When he consumes a sentient entity, he not only absorbs them physically, but he also absorbs their psyche. He claimed that he has the ability to feel the mind of his first meal, a rat, not too long after he crawled from the FEV vats in the Mariposa military base. It is likely that over time, the master's personality becomes a we, a unity, as opposed to an I, with other minds becoming a chorus that echoed Gray's primary will, but also occasionally voice his unconscious doubts or questions. As for the computer voice, Gray had a neural link with the Cathedral Vault computers, so he, or at least one of his chorus minds, was able to speak through it as well. As I understand it, the computer voice was added to make him sound even creepier, since he was a pretty tame-looking mass of protoplasm without it. It looks like the designers themselves wouldn't confidently say that the primary voice we associate with the Master is even Richard Gray himself. That is something I had not really considered before reading this. It also drives home his concept of the unity even deeper, seeing how he has achieved some sort of unity with all the different organisms and people that he subsumed. Additionally, I find it interesting that his integration with the computer system was done simply to increase the creepiness factor rather than a deeper lore-based reason. I also find his comment about the Master being the last telepath kind of funny, because we definitely know that is not the case with all the later Fallout games. Question 6 is, were the geckos in Fallout 2 robots because they definitely sounded robotic and their blood was very dark, almost like oil? Chris answered, no, they're flesh and blood. If they sound like robots, blame our audio department or turn down your speakers. I can't say I ever had this impression playing the games at all, but if you did, I'd be interested to hear why in the comments. Question 7 is, when the bombs dropped, all communication between the vaults were severed, so if there was no way to communicate with the vaults, how did the Enclave send a message to Vault 13 telling the people it's time to go? Chris answered, communication between vaults was never in place. It might ruin the experiments, but communication with the government/Enclave/Vault-Tec was a different story. They needed some way of monitoring the vaults. The Enclave having access to the Vault-Tec construction plans, not too surprising considering the fact that the vaults were funded by the government, had a way of monitoring events taking place within the vaults. Not only could they access their computers and systems remotely, including Pip-Boys and the personal logs of the vault dwellers, but the early overseers of most of the vaults knew of the ties to the government, and it was part of their duties to download information on the citizens and the vault into a computer archive that the government could easily access. Their tie to the vault computers also gave the Enclave the ability to override any vault locking mechanism and send an all-clear signal to sealed vaults, coaxing the inhabitants to come outside. Again, almost no Vault dwellers were ever aware of this. For some Fallout 2 relevant information on the matter, here's what the player says in Fallout 2, and here's what Lynette says in response. Note, as evidence below, keep in mind that Lynette's archives are suspect and they should not be treated as truth. Player: how did you know when to leave the vault? I heard the vaults were isolated from the outside world. Lynette: what you heard was incorrect. Our archives are quite clear. Our vault received the all-clear signal 2 years after being sealed. Player: the all-clear signal? From where? Lynette, confused: why, from surface monitors, I suppose. I am certain there were sensors monitoring the environment. How else would the Overseer have known when it was safe to leave? Player: so the order to leave the vault came from the Overseer? Lynette: yes. Thinking, uncertain. At least that is what I remember from the archives. Confidence returns. However, I am certain many citizens were responsible for monitoring the surface sensors. Player: really? Do these monitors still exist? Can I see them? Lynette, angry, not certain where the player is going with this, but doesn't like it. Quite likely they were disassembled and used as upgrades for other systems. And that's all she wrote. It is a dark foreshadowing to what was really going on in these cauldrons of evil. In any event, I remember having a conversation with the designers about the Overseer's roles in the vaults, and the early Overseers were the ones tasked with supplying information to the government. Although when the world blew up, there wasn't really anyone to supply it to anymore, since the Enclave took some time to get back up and running. In any event, enough blather. Hope that helps. So this is a good question. Communication between vaults has never been demonstrated, and it makes sense that they would be isolated from each other. We can explore Vault-Tec headquarters in Fallout 2, Fallout 3, and Fallout 4, and while they have information about the individual vaults, there's nothing to indicate that they could readily communicate with them. I would not be surprised though to find out that they did indeed have a way of sending or at least receiving information, since many of the vaults were meant to be experiments and provide results. Question 8 is short, with an equally short answer from Chris. Are you sure the UN broke up? Yep, the UN broke up. It doesn't call, it doesn't write, the relationship is over. This doesn't really seem all that surprising when considering the state of the world leading up to the Great War. You had Europe and the Middle East waging a war over resources, and China and the US engaged in a hot war as well. I don't know how much cooperation could have taken place among member states in such a tumultuous state. Question 9 is, do you guys know what that ending of the hub with the ghouls and humans uniting is all about? It says Harold and the VD unite the ghouls and humans of the hub. Anybody seen more ghouls than Harold in the hub? Can't be about Necropolis because it's the only good ending for the hub. Chris responds with, although there weren't any ghouls shown in the hub in Fallout 1, there may have been a handful wandering around an old town, kinda like Talius, the ghoul in the boneyard. The ending is more appropriate if you just mentally change the word ghouls to skags. Basically, peace and harmony reigned supreme. It's possible several ghouls traveled to the hub during the migration after they formed their engineering development house in Necropolis. This is a good point, seeing as ghouls are not widely seen in Fallout 1 outside of Necropolis, and it's interesting that Chris acknowledges this and even provides a headcanon change to make this ending make more sense, changing the word ghoul, which are very specific creatures in Fallout, to skag, which is a general term for poor people living in the hub old town. The last question is, what I really want to know about the one of two endings in Fallout Tactics. The ending where you decide to join the calculator, it says about the Brotherhood of Steel elders gone missing and that they couldn't be found. Does anyone have any idea who or what killed them? Or is it one of the X-Files sort of mysteries you have to wait and wait? Chris says, it's supposed to be a mystery, a loose thread that can lead to other plot lines. I actually find this response from Chris interesting because it is the first mention from him and the first question pertaining to Fallout Tactics in the whole Bible. He had previously taken a specific stance stating he would only include information relating to Fallout 1 and 2. Although mentioning tactics at all seems like a change, it seems his old attitude remains, as his answer is very short and non-specific. This is also a very common approach to these types of questions because it can be easy for developers to paint themselves into a corner with future installments. They have more freedom in upcoming games if they leave a lot of things ambiguous. The next section is the one Chris calls Fallout Archaeology, which I don't completely understand, but it's a section where he writes all the possible keywords that you can ask talking head characters in the first Fallouts. He goes over Killian Darkwater and Gizmo. So, here's Gizmos. Killian Darkwater, Gizmo, Darkwaters, Gizmos, Junktown, Deathclaw. So, in Chris's own words, well, Gizmo's section bites the big one. Here's Killian, Gizmo, Killian Darkwater, Lars, Vinny, Doc Morbid, Skulls, Cons, Vipers, Darkwaters, Crash House, Gizmos, Scum Pit, Children of the Cathedral, Deathclaw, Hub, Shady Sands, Necropolis, Raiders, War, Strange Things, Junktown. Chris then moves on to a section where he shows us the special stats for NPCs, which wasn't as accessible or easily found online in those days. This is a dog that is encountered in Fallout 2 that will join the player's party and give the chosen one the Jinxed trait, which drops their luck to 1. He doesn't fight enemies, opting for just running away, and can only be dismissed by killing him or having the Hebologist do their Zeta scan, which the implications of that are kind of interesting. Killing him is not as easy as you'd think, as he has 750 HP. His special stats appear as such. So yeah, not great. I would actually love to have jinxed or unlucky characters that can be encountered in newer Fallout games. Chris shows Gorrus's stats over 6 levels. Given that Gorrus is an intelligent Deathclaw, I think that these stats make sense. High stats and everything but charisma, because even though they are intelligent, I doubt they are really smooth talkers. Solik's 6 level stats are here. His stats are all fairly high. I'm a bit surprised by his charisma skill since, while he is not unlikable by any means, his proclivity to commune with people that are not there would be a little off-putting. Lenny the Ghoul is a stage 3 character shown here. There isn't a whole lot of change, and he is said to be quite old, so maybe it's a can't teach an old dog new tricks type of situation that we have going on here. Chris ends this entry with a hint to get a free fusion cell in Fallout 2. He says to go to the new Reno stables and look for a Brahmin that is mooing differently from everybody else. Use the doctor skill and hope that you are successful within 3 tries, or the Brahmin will turn hostile and you won't get your fusion cell. Chris then teases his next hint that will come in the next Bible installment that says that the magic 8-ball for high luck characters is more than just a toy. Chris gets 3 points here for working a cliffhanger into something as obscure as the Fallout Bible. That is it for this Fallout entry, which is shorter than many of the others, mostly because it didn't have a giant timeline to go over. So, let's take a look at a bunch of comments from my last video about some of the big guns of Fallout. The 5mm round that miniguns use in Fallout generated a lot of comments and debate. People brought up some good points, like how the smaller round could additionally help with managing recoil. Others mentioned that smaller, faster rounds have been shown to increase armor penetration, and additionally, it was pointed out in a great comment that the way the rounds are portrayed in-game seems to show that they are actually quite long, which could mean that they could function similar to a tank sabot round, meaning that greater penetration was the intention. If this were the case, it would be cool to see miniguns in-game do extra damage to armored targets. I really like the conversations that are being had about this though. It's pretty obvious that with our powers combined, we can justify any bad lore. Many of you reminded me that you can also get the Cyberdog gun by convincing the think tank to give you one. If your gun's skill is higher than 75, they'll give you some extra 357 rounds. And Dr. Klein will make it known that he's afraid the Cyberdog gun will hump his chassis, which is just so old world blues. Many of you let me know how inconsistent I am by saying my pronunciation of Shosha was acceptable, but I screwed up Fletchits, or should I say Fluche. I just can't win them all, but that's why I have you. Must Pake commented asking why I didn't mention the XM214 microgun, and the simple answer is because I was not even aware of this gun. Simple, yet pretty unsatisfying answer for sure, but the moment I achieve perfection, I'll let you guys know. Probably write a self-help book and give a TED Talk while I'm at it too. I got many answers for what the numbers and flashing lights on the side of the red glare could refer to. Many were fanciful, and some were pretty reasonable. There was only one correct answer though, brought to you by AK. Also, I hear that his source is very dependable, especially with a high fiber diet. Grievously Tired and Nathaniel Perry had some good comments about Gatling gun designs that were designed to use almost no external power source. For all we know, that could be the way the Fallout miniguns operate. It would for sure extend the life of the power source, if it was only ever needed to get the gun firing, and not sustained firing. A few of you correctly reminded me that there are other weapons that show unused ammo on the player character like the minigun, and wouldn't you know it, it's the laser minigun. Sheldon King commented on the Brotherhood of Steel heavy machine gun using a .44 caliber round and offered some real-world rifle round alternatives. While totally possible, we might be giving the game a bit too much credit here. Dex Ex Machina 2 commented that a lower-tech, real-world example of the red glare is the Fliegerfaust or Luftfaust, which was a late World War II era multi-barreled rocket launcher intended to shoot down aircraft. This is an awesome catch, and I'm glad that they brought this up because it is very interesting to read about, so you should all look it up. Marshall Tito commented on the Shosha, stating that the original weapon was actually pretty good and on par with most automatic weapons of the time. It was the version chambered in the .30-06 that had the issues that gave it the bad rap it is henceforth stuck with. So the moral of the story here is to always do your own homework. Peeger let me know that the K9000 Cyberdog gun is a reference to a 1991 movie called K9000, which was the second movie in the K9 series of movies, where a cop with a cybernetic connection with a cybernetic German Shepherd fights crime. This is such an obscure reference and I just love it. Predator761 made a great comment that corrected me, saying that the first major engagement that the Gatling gun served in was the Spanish-American War and not the American Civil War. And that wraps up this comment highlight and this video. May Adam guide your paths, and I will see you in my next video.